The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, ladies and gents, to an all-new, brand-new, shiny new episode of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. That's right, the IWC podcast is here for your listening pleasure this week. I'm your host, as always, Billy Donnelly. Later in the show, the Professor, Tom Nix, will be joining me to talk about some New Japan Pro Wrestling. We'll also be discussing our Evolve 81 homework, and we're going to dive a little bit into the world of Texas independent wrestling. That's later in the show, so stay tuned for that. Like I said, broadening our horizons here on the IWC. But first up, there's some WWE business I do want to discuss this week. And once again, as I've discussed now since the relaunch of the podcast, I don't want to get into recaps of Monday Night Raw or SmackDown Live. That's not very interesting or exciting. But there are larger scale issues that I do want to talk about, and I got one this week from both Raw and SmackDown coming out of the Superstar shakeup, and that has to do with a now influx of talent into the main event picture. I've been seeing some grumbling, some complaining, some bitching and moaning, as is usual from the smart marks, about what is going on right now, particularly on SmackDown Live as it pertains to the championship landscape of the Tuesday night WWE show. If you didn't watch SmackDown Live this past week, I'm going to give you, well, here's your spoiler alert, because I'm going to drop into some spoiler territory right now. Jinder Mahal became the #1 contender for the WWE Championship, currently held by Randy Orton, who is then going to defend it on a Raw pay-per-view against Bray Wyatt, and that's a whole other story altogether. But Jinder Mahal is your #1 contender past Bray Wyatt for the WWE Championship, which would probably lead you to believe that Bray Wyatt's going to go down in flames, no pun intended, given the state of the Wyatt family compound in recent months, when he faces Randy Orton for his title in the House of Horrors match. But that's neither here nor there. The issue seems to be with the fact that Jinder Mahal is the #1 contender. And look, I can see where you might have some issue with the way this was laid out. Since Jinder Mahal has been made a part of the main roster once again, after departing several years back, after the three-man band fiasco, he has been nothing but sort of enhancement talent. Jinder Mahal doesn't win matches. Jinder Mahal doesn't beat anybody. Jinder Mahal is there to make other guys look good, to make people above him look credible. He's not a jobber, so to speak, but he also isn't really a winner. Jinder Mahal, since his return, has been a guy who you stick in the ring with someone who can give them a good match and who ultimately can enhance their stature, not only within the company, but before the audience of the WWE. In front of the WWE universe, Jinder Mahal's job is to make other people have challenging matches and come out on the other end looking better than they did going in. So it's not a waste of time, but it's a way to further establish the legitimacy of other talent. Now, as we saw with the Superstar shakeup, Jinder Mahal has now been drafted to SmackDown. And as I've been saying for weeks, and I've been saying it on Twitter for months now, SmackDown Live is the island of misfit toys. This is where wrestlers go that Monday Night Raw has no idea what to do with them. They don't have a creative direction for them. They don't even have a creative idea for them. They just have talent that they go, I don't know what to do with them. And they rot in limbo on Monday Night Raw. And now when it comes time for a draft or a superstar shakeup or whatever the hell you want to call it, a swap, a trade, anything, they send the people in desperate need of rehabilitation over to Tuesday night. They give them to the SmackDown creative team. They say, here, you figure it out. You fix them. You rebuild them. You revamp them. You shine them back up. Give them a nice polish. And probably in a year from now, when their value is redeemed, when they're worth more than the dirt we made them into, then we'll probably take them back and we'll send you some other guys that we screwed up. That seems to be the life cycle in the WWE as of late, is that the people that Monday Night Raw did not know what to do with, they go to SmackDown. SmackDown fixes them, and then Raw takes them back and then cycles back other people in desperate need of a revamp. That's what happened with the draft last year. And if you recall, a long time ago, before we relaunched this show, when we did talk about the draft, we talked quite honestly about how Monday Night Raw seemed to be the winner of the draft. And why was that? It was ultimately because if you looked at the name value of the talent that made up Monday Night Raw, it was overwhelming. You had name after name after name after name who made up Monday Night Raw. And it was extremely a top-heavy show. The problem with that is that when you are filled with nothing but main eventers, where's the drop-off point? Because there can only be a handful of people in the main event at any given time. You can't have 15 main eventers. You got to have a few, and then you make up, the U.S. title or the Intercontinental title picture. Maybe you stick some guys in tag teams. You maybe you just put some people in some blood feuds. But you got to figure out a way to sort of lay out the hierarchy of your superstars. SmackDown Live was able to do that a little bit more because even though they did not have the marquee names that Monday Night Raw did, that allowed them freedom to experiment, freedom to have some mobility on the card. Move some guys up, move some guys down, move some guys up, move some guys down. Maybe move guys a little bit laterally to make some room for some people to come up or to shift down. But either way, you had a ladder, a very clear ladder for people to go up and down the card. And as a result, even if you had people move down the card some, there was still the expectation and impression that they could very quickly rise back up. Main eventers didn't have to be main eventers all the time. Main eventers could come down a little bit and then go back up where it was needed. And really, that's the way things should be. You don't want the same people in the main events all the time. How many times did we just get so tired of seeing John Cena and Randy Orton over the course of like 1 year at a particular point in time? So you want some fresh talent to be able to move up and move down. You want people who are not necessarily main eventers to become main eventers so that at any given point in time they can credibly be interjected into a main event scenario. Let's just go back a few years or so ago. You would have people in the main event who right now, as they would sit in the main event in the WWE landscape, you would not necessarily envision as main eventers. Let's not forget, The Big Show was a world champion in the WWE, and prior to that in WCW. You wouldn't look at The Big Show right now and say, oh, that guy's definitely a main eventer. his main event capabilities, but that's because at one point in time, he was established that if you took the Big Show and needed him in the main event, then he could possibly give you that. Kane was a main eventer and a world champion at one point in time. Mark Henry was a main eventer and a world champion at one point in time. And now let's even go back to a different point where you had talent like Rey Mysterio or Eddie Guerrero or Booker T for that matter. These weren't necessarily talents that were always seen as main eventers. These weren't people that jumped off the page at the bookers and the creative staff and said, man, this guy has world champion written all over him. CM Punk wasn't a guy that people looked at and said, man, this guy can easily be a main eventer all the time. They had to be thrust into that next level at one point in time. They needed a jetpack strapped right to their ass to send them right up there, right up the ladder in order to get there. And the only way that was done was with a determination that we want to make them there. We need to get them there. And they were pushed in that direction and got there. Didn't always necessarily happen overnight. And maybe that's some of the gripe that we're seeing with Jinder Mahal here, is that it seemed to happen overnight. A guy who had been just laid to waste in recent months on Monday Night Raw crosses over the lines to SmackDown Live and overnight is put into the main event picture. Look, I can understand that argument by saying they just didn't build him enough for me to accept him. And I get it. They did that. The WWE did that not too long ago with Jack Swagger when they were in desperate need of someone to compete for championships, and Jack Swagger was just taken off the scrap heap and thrown into the main event because they needed a guy. They didn't build him there. They just took a guy who went from loser to main event, and they said, here, buy in. And they expected the WWE Universe to buy in hook, line, and sinker at that point to Jack Swagger being a main eventer. So I could get that level of criticism against the Jinder Mahal leap of faith that we're seeing right now, which is just buy into him as a main eventer because we're telling you to, and disregard everything that came before it. You know, I don't necessarily know that it's a lazy way of booking, but it is SmackDown Live wasting no time trying to revitalize and rebuild the value of the talent that they have. Because how does it serve them to continue the status quo? How does it serve a show like SmackDown to take damaged individuals from Raw and continue them on a damaged path? It doesn't. It doesn't. Their job right now is to take as many people as they may have in their grasp and make them believable competitors for anything, for an Intercontinental Championship title shot, for a world title shot. You have people like Mojo Rawley, who prior was really sort of seen as a joke. Even when he was down in NXT, he sort of started out on the rise, hit a ceiling, and then was sort of seen as a joke in a number of ways. You would never look at Mojo Rawley and see a championship contender in the persona and the character that he brings to any show. But right now, especially following WrestleMania and his win in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, Mojo Rawley is seeing his stock go up because they have now made him more than just a joke. They have made him somebody that can get wins in matches on television. And that helps go a long way to getting into the subconscious of the mind of a WWE watcher and have them suspend disbelief when they watch a match. And what it also does, this is something I've talked about at length on the show, is it adds an air of unpredictability to what you're watching. If you watch Jinder Mahal in a match against anyone prior to this, you would usually put money down that Jinder Mahal would be the one seeing the lights at the end of it. When the bell rang and the 1, 2, 3 was counted, it'd be somebody else's arm being raised in victory, not Jinder Mahal's. That is now not the case. When Jinder Mahal has a match now, you would see, I wonder who could win this match. Now you're intrigued, you're interested. There's an air of mystery around it. It's unpredictable, and it leads to compelling television to watch. It leads to something where you don't necessarily know the outcome. And that's something that's good for all of us. Because if we can go along on this predictable journey all the time and see everything coming, then what's the point? You know, some rides are not necessarily about the destination. They are about the journey. And even though we know where we're going, if the journey is worthwhile, then we almost forget about the destination. But other times we want just a good destination to get to here. And this is something that I think works both ways in building new talent into the main event. Because that's where SmackDown is right now. John Cena's on a break for a little while. The Miz is gone. Bray Wyatt is gone. Dean Ambrose is gone. AJ Styles is still there, but they're figuring out what they're going to do with him because he was at the main event for so long, and they need to make room for some others. So what are you going to see on SmackDown? You're going to see the rise of people like Kevin Owens. You're going to see the rise of people like Sami Zayn. You're going to see the rise of people like Baron Corbin. You're going to see the rise of people like Jinder Mahal, because it benefits the show as a whole to have an interchangeable amount of talent who could credibly compete for any championship at any point in time. You want your talent to all look strong as best as possible. And yeah, there's going to be people who are obviously higher than others, but when you watch a match, you should have an idea in your head that this can go one of two ways, not that the end is a certainty. So, look, I understand the point about Jinder Mahal sort of just leapfrogging everyone after the way he's been built in recent months to be a main eventer. But at that point, you also have to say to yourself, what's the end game with Jinder Mahal? Does Jinder Mahal being in the main event add value not only to him, but to SmackDown Live as a whole? And I think it does. Remember, we're battling against previous perceptions here. I mean, that's really the big thing with Jinder Mahal. Jinder Mahal, at one point in time, was meant to be a really big deal in the WWE when he very first was called up to the main roster. Many, many years ago, before the three-man patent, many years ago, Jinder Mahal was meant to be a big deal and was seen as a main event heel, potentially. And what wound up happening? Vince McMahon soured on Jinder Mahal, as he has on many other talents in the past, and that was sort of it. The story of Jinder Mahal was then written. And Jinder Mahal fell down the card, and Jinder Mahal went into three-man band, and Jinder Mahal was gone. Now, there were times along the way where there were pitches through WWE Creative to rebuild Jinder Mahal. There was an idea of bringing him back to India and having him sort of, go back to his roots and get back to winning and sort of using his money a little bit to rise up the card. And there were a number of different ideas thrown out there to get Jinder Mahal back to what he was originally conceived to be. But as I said, the idea of Jinder Mahal was already written. Jinder Mahal was seen one way, and there was no amount of good ideas that was going to be able to course correct it at that time. Even now, Jinder Mahal came back, and Jinder Mahal was still seen very much in the way that Jinder Mahal was seen when he was written off years ago. And Jinder Mahal has worked hard to rebrand himself in the eyes of the WWE. Let's not forget, Jinder Mahal right now is a monster. If you look at Jinder Mahal physically, he is humongous, way bigger than he ever was at any point in time in his WWE career. And he is doing something that I'm pretty sure he knows will catch the eye of others in the WWE as far as what a superstar looks like, how they're perceived, and he is out there to change hearts and minds. So in that respect, Jinder Mahal is ultimately a success story. And Jinder Mahal using the Bollywood boys to help him cheat his way to the #1 contendership helps him become now a full-fledged and believable heel. A guy who has sort of cut the line through nefarious means. So that helps sort of mitigate the idea of Jinder Mahal skipping ahead of what smart marks would determine as, quote, more deserving talent. And who knows if Jinder Mahal will be the world champion in a few weeks. Who knows where this may take Jinder Mahal. But what I do know is that now you are working to establish a brand new heel on a main event level on SmackDown Live. And that is a good thing, because for all we talk about how much we want new talent brought into the main event picture to change things up, to have a fresh perspective, Jinder Mahal is it. So you can't go back and be hypocritical and say, oh, but I wanted somebody else. We don't get to pick and choose. If you want new talent, you say, I want new talent, and we'll get new talent. Jinder Mahal right now at that point is new talent. He's a guy who hasn't been here in a long time. He's a guy who hasn't really sniffed the main event scene. So he has upward mobility on the card, and that is good. If you want to gripe about how he got there, so be it. I can understand that to a degree. But let's not forget, SmackDown Live has sent a message that they are wasting no time in trying to use all of the assets that they have at their disposal to make their show better. And in a few weeks, if you're booing Jinder Mahal and you're booing the Bollywood boys and you are rooting against them as they line up for a challenge of Randy Orton and his WWE Championship, then SmackDown Live and its creative team has done their job. Then Jinder Mahal has done what he was asked to you. And it's not how he got there, it's how you have since bought in, and that is all that they are really asking to do. They are trying to rebrand, revitalize, rehab so much of the talent that they have on their hands in SmackDown Live that was broken at the hands of others. So I'm willing to give them some leeway. I'm willing to see where it goes. I'm willing to wait and see without being hypercritical about it. And look, and I understand the mindset or the complaint about how we got here. But when you're going from one show to another, you can't expect show number 2 to continue to ramp up the mistakes of what was done by their predecessor. You can only hope that they jump in with both feet, try to right the wrongs, and in the end, give us a compelling wrestling show as a result. See, and then you shift to the tag team division, and you would look at the Shining Stars as being in the same boat as Jinder Mahal. The Shining Stars being traded from Raw to SmackDown Live now, the Shining Stars were nowhere. They were nobody going nowhere fast. Nobody gave a shit about Primo and Epico. Nobody has cared about them for the longest time. Nobody cared about them when they were just Primo and Epico. Nobody cared about them when they were Los Matadores. Nobody cared about them as the Shining Stars. Nobody cared. They have been saddled with so many horrendous gimmicks in recent years that you almost have to wonder if the damage is irreversible. Because nobody cares. They've been written off and no one cares. And this isn't like sending them down to developmental to try and like revamp or re-trigger themselves. Almost like they did with Emma at one point in time. And sort of the evil Emma coming up from the ashes of the sort of bubbly, fun, more awkward Emma. You know, you can't really do that with the Colon brothers because they've been in this business for a long time. So sending them down to developmental, there's nothing for them to really learn. You just have to redevelop who it is that they are and the characters that it is that you're asking them to play. And they have been given horrible characters to play. Horrible characters. Horrible. To the point that nobody cares. Because why would you care about any characters that terrible? But you trade them from Raw to SmackDown, and much in the way that they've done with Jinder Mahal, the SmackDown creative team said, we got to build these guys up. Our tag team division is lacking. Our main event division is lacking. We need new blood in these areas. And so what do? On SmackDown, the crowd was in shock when the Colones defeated American Alpha, who has fallen a little bit since their call up to the main roster, but are still a pretty successful and established tag team. I mean, let's not forget, this team was SmackDown Tag Team Champions. American Alpha was SmackDown Tag Team Champions. So for you to have the Shining Stars, or the Colones as we're now going to call them, get a win, that helps set them in the right direction, on the right course, and makes them legitimate players in the tag team division, because this isn't going to be one of those fluke victories. This is something that you use to build on, and it doesn't hurt American Alpha. They may take a dip right now just because of the loss, but if they still look good at the end, you know, this one happens sort of by hook or by crook with a referee distraction. And now it means that when American Alpha fight the Colones in the future, that there's uncertainty as to who might win. That helps your tag division. Much in the same way that having Jinder Mahal win a big match over other credible challengers makes him a player in the main event division. Or in the championship, the world championship division. Now you're taking talent that is in desperate need of revival, giving them the rub of a win over teams or individuals that fans already buy into, and now add another piece to the puzzle. Is it sudden? Yes, absolutely. Is it from 0 to contender in like 2 seconds? Yes, no doubt about it. But that does not mean that they cannot make this work. I am absolutely in favor of Jinder Mahal being a part of the main event scene. I am absolutely now in favor of the Colones, if they can figure out something to do character-wise to make them major players in the tag team division on SmackDown Live. This is what SmackDown does really well. They make people who are disregarded now highly regarded. And if their track record says anything, it's the Jinder Mahal with the Bollywood Boys will be people of note now on SmackDown Live. is to say that the Colognes will be notable in the tag team division of SmackDown Live. Would I love to see Carlito come back? I know that was rumored for a long time when the brand extension was happening, that we may see him become a player. Could he come back and have a family faction of sorts? Tell you what, SmackDown will look pretty good. A couple of warring factions, perhaps. I think there's a lot of potential here. I don't think people should be writing it off with a knee-jerk reaction. Yeah, I know you want AJ Styles in the main event. I do too. He's worked his ass off and he's earned it, and he's proven to be one of the best people in the company. But AJ Styles doesn't take a hit by stepping to the side for a little bit and letting others rise up. When the tide rises, all boats will be floating with this rising tide here on SmackDown Live. And I'm in favor of it. I wish Jinder Mahal nothing but the best. I wish the Colognes, hopefully now the 8th time is the try for them on SmackDown. I wish them nothing but the best, because I think overall, if all of those parties can find success with their new directions, SmackDown Live as a brand wins, SmackDown as a TV show wins, and us as wrestling fans, we all win with the upward mobility as well. New blood. We've been asking for it. We're getting it. Let's see where it takes us. It's time to get to the Tom Nix portion of this week's show. Tom Nix is our resident wrestling guru, our expert out in the field to bring us attention to things that we should be aware of, things that are not on our radar. You can follow him on Twitter at the Tom Nix. That's THE Tom Nix, Nix. So Tom Nix joining us once again this week on the This Is Infamous Hotline. Tom, thank you very much once again for carving out some time from your nonstop wrestling watching to talk more wrestling.
I mean, if I can't be watching wrestling, I might as well be talking wrestling, right?
Exactly. So look here. Let's get the last week's homework out of the way before we move on to this week's business. So last week, the homework assignment was to go seek out Evolve 81 and watch Keith Lee versus Donovan Dijak. That was the homework. And I, wanting to lead by example for our listenership, went out. I mean, I borrowed somebody's FlowSlam account, but I still got it, okay? And I got on FlowSlam, and I did power through the horrible navigation and streaming of FlowSlam, but that's another story altogether, to watch the match. And I did sit and watch Keith Lee versus Donovan Dijak. So I did absorb it all.
Okay, so I need to hear all about it. And yes, we can definitely talk about how their navigation system needs a total overhaul.
Yes, FlowSlam needs some work. I thought it was okay. And I knew that groan was coming. And here's what I will lay out for Keith Lee and Donovan Dijak. I think both guys have tremendous potential. Okay, and I still have to watch this through a prism of these are still guys on the rise. These are still guys who haven't fully put it together. These are still guys who need the polish here and there to really make themselves the full package. But you can clearly see the athleticism is there, the agility is there. They have the tools to make it work. As far as the match was concerned for me, and this is something that I've talked to you about on a number of levels at different times, is I wish that the match worked at a little bit of a slower pace. I like the idea of building towards Keith Lee hitting the moonsault finally. There were, I believe, 2 failed attempts to land the moonsault until he finally did hit the moonsault. But the problem is along the way, and I find this that I have this problem with a number of matches that sort of are laid out this way, is when every move is an impact move, there are no impact moves. And I found that in this match, I had a hard time getting into it because right out of the gate, like I don't even think there's a lockup. I think right out of the gate, they go to like a face smush, and then there's like punches and chops engaged, and then it's sort of just like power move after power move, or even like a reversal of a power move after reversal of a power move. I found myself longing for a headlock at one time. I was just like, can I just get like a headlock at one point just to sort of slow it down? Because what happens is it lets the power move sit there and resonate. It's like watching a Michael Bay movie. Like if I watch a Michael Bay movie and it's just 2.5 hours of just explosions, the explosions mean nothing after a while because they're just blowing shit up all the time. So that was really my main criticism watching this match is between the choke slams and the power bombs and the moonsaults and like I think there was like an inverted GTS of sorts from Donovan Dijak.
Yes.
I wanted it to slow down a little bit because then it lets those moves sit there and have some weight to them.
So your analysis is 100% correct. Let me offer my counter analysis.
Okay.
And obviously this is different because I was there live watching this and you watched it on video, and it's a totally different experience. Watching WrestleMania on TV is not the same thing as being at WrestleMania live. And the same thing with any wrestling or any concert. No one will prefer a live album over going to a show, right? So, my counterpoint to that is that while, yes, that would have made much more psychological sense to do more rest holds, like do less power moves, or make the ones you do matter more by taking a little bit of breathing room. What I thought was amazing, again, this was probably a lot of people's in that audience's first time seeing Keith Lee, because Evolve shows don't sell crazy well. They might do 200, 250 maybe on a normal Evolve show, but WrestleMania weekend, that place had 1,200 people in it because they had a venue to do it and they had the fans there to watch it. So this is the first time people were maybe seeing Keith Lee, maybe seeing Donovan Dijak. He's been a little more high profile in Ring of Honor, so I imagine people have at least heard of him before. But what I thought was incredible about this match is that they introduced two 300+ pound guys. One of them's like 6'6", the other one's maybe 6'1", but they're both huge dudes. And they went out and had a lucha libre match, basically. They jumped over each other. They hit nothing but superhero moves. It wasn't about like big guy psychology or being more powerful than the other. It was basically like watching Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis, only they're 5 times the size. And I thought that was incredible.
I mean, I'm all about defying expectations. I like these two guys are a clear example of don't judge a book by its cover, because you would see Keith Lee coming down to the ring and you would never expect him to have the capabilities that he does, which is why the Limitless moniker that he has is perfectly fitting, because you would never believe that guy can do these things until you see him do it. So to that respect, I can say, I'm impressed. I'm impressed by them individually, I guess. I think
it's just that this match wasn't your style of match. You would rather have had a better told story than just a superhero showcase, which is completely true. Absolutely. Yeah,
I mean, the elements are there. The moonsault thing is there. Like, even you don't have to have like a long giant angle. Like some people believe when it comes to certain matches, and not everything has to be like a long form WWE type of story. You can have just a story within a match to lay out the way that the match is going to go. And I thought that the element of him not being able to land the moonsault was there. Like, that's sort of the underpinning of that match. And then here's where I also thought they wound up airing it, is that then he finally does land this move. And Dijak kicks out of it. And for me, like, it just pulled the rug out of the story, because yes, the whole thing had been him landing this giant move to the point where I think the first two he's just doing it from the middle rope, which is impressive enough, and then for the last one, the big one, he goes up to the top and he lands it. This 350-pound guy is soaring through the air and lands a moonsault High Impact, and then the guy kicks out at 2, and you go, wait. We built this whole time to this, and now what? Because now all it does is it sucks the life out of the moonsault. You know what I mean? Like now it takes the specialness away from that particular move. So now even moving forward, if the moonsault gets landed by Keith Lee, in the back of your mind you go, I don't know. This match may continue because I don't know that the moonsault is all that great. So so there's those elements to that match, and hindsight is 20/20. So it's easy to look at these things after or while I'm watching it, and then sort of nitpick it, I guess, to death afterwards. But I found it was more difficult for me to get into sort of the core of this match because it was just one move after another, and I don't know. A match like that doesn't necessarily work for me because of that. For example, if I was watching a boxing match and dudes just threw haymakers all fight, first of all, fights don't go down like that, but it would be less special when they do land some. Sometimes you just gotta throw some jabs in. I'm okay with a headlock. I'm okay with an arm bar. I'm okay with these things along the way, just so I can come down. If you hit a bunch of those moves or a series of those moves, and I'm riding the high of them, that's great. But I gotta be able to come down, because if I just stay high, I'm just plateauing. Like there's nothing there for me to come up and down on.
Yeah, and I think from just the course of a 2.5, 3 hour show, that match was just one of the highs, because there were matches on that show that were much slower, more methodical, and you have to have both in-ring ups and downs, but also show up and downs. And maybe if you had watched the whole show, that match would have stuck out a little more, because it is just one of the high crests of that show. But since now I'm more in tune with what you like in wrestling, if you still have that login, go back to the same show and watch Fred Yehi versus Matt Riddle, which is a very technical grappling submission match with some power moves, because both of them have power moves. But go watch Fred Yehi versus Matt Riddle from Evolve 81.
All right,
I think that'll be much more up your speed.
There we go. That's now we have homework right out of the gate on this segment. We have homework for next week. We're going right back to Evolve 81. But I think you make a fair point too, which is that sometimes watching a match in isolation just on its own can sometimes be a drawback on the match. Look, there are some great matches that you could just watch by themselves. You don't need anything around them, because the match does everything that it needs to do. But I do think you make a really great point, which is that sometimes matches like that just have their place in the card, and the card itself can be the story. Right. And we talked about this. We talked about this before too, which is that wrestling is like a circus. That every match itself has its own role, and while not every match may be for you, somebody else may like it. And I think for this match may not have been for me, but if somebody else went out and they sought out Keith Lee versus Donovan Dijak at Evolve 81, and this did it for them, this is the point of this segment, is to sort of expose you to these things.
You got it. And and like I said, that whole pay-per-view is really good. That was the high point for me, but you're going to find something. If that wasn't up your alley, trust me, there's something else in that card that is.
All right, so Matt Riddle is where we're going next week for the homework. So Evolve 81, Matt Riddle's match at Evolve 81. This is the one that we're tapping into. So once again, if you can, that's your homework for next week. Try to expose yourself to something different or that you may not have seen. So Matt Riddle's match at Evolve 81. Mark it down. Get your homework done. And we'll discuss it again next week. Now, we originally had plans this week to sort of dip into some New Japan. New Japan Pro Wrestling has gotten little bits of shine here on this show from time to time, but it's not. It's first of all, I don't have access TV, so it's not something I go out of my way to try and get caught up on. But New Japan Pro Wrestling is at least stateside now, probably at its highest point ever. I can't remember a time where New Japan was this much attention was cast on New Japan, on the Wrestle Kingdom pay-per-views, on everything that's going on in New Japan. So this week, the original plan was to talk a little bit about what was going on in New Japan Pro Wrestling. But we sort of have a wrench in the gears this week, and as a result, we're going to shy away from that a little bit. And I'm going to let Tom explain to you why we sort of took New Japan off the menu as wholeheartedly as originally was planned.
Yeah, so we definitely talked about, hey, we want to spotlight what's going on because we just finished up the New Japan Cup a little while ago, which is a early year tournament, kind of like King of the Ring, where it's just an 16 man, I think, elimination tournament where, you know, whoever wins moves on to the next bracket and whoever wins moves on to the next bracket. And whoever wins the New Japan Cup can challenge for any of the heavyweight belts. So the world belt, the Intercontinental belt, or the Never Openweight Championship belt. And it was a really great tournament this year where the bookers absolutely hated you if you had a bracket because all of the superstars, like all the big name people that were in it, basically lost on the first night. So they really like. I think one of the Squared Circle Reddit people, like, they had the bracket, and after night 3, out of 2,000 entries, not one of them could have had a perfect bracket, and that was after night 3 of like 8. So it was a really fun, cool tournament where a lot of people who was like, oh yeah, it's time for this guy to, you know, get his shot. Nope. Okay, well then I guess this guy's going to get it. Nope. Oh, well then, I mean, it must be this guy. Nope. So it was very interesting. But the winner of the tournament ended up being Katsuyori Shibata, who is a wrestler who came up with the likes of Shinsuke Nakamura and Hiroyoshi Tanahashi. And then he left for a while to go be an actual shoot fighter, like be a MMA fighter. He came back a couple of years ago to great fanfare because he was kind of one of the quote-unquote three amigos with Shinsuke and Tanahashi, and people really had high hopes for him being a wrestler, but he's never been world champion. He's had several other high-profile belts, but this would have been his first true world championship, although he has fought for it in the past. So he ended up winning in a fantastic match. And again, as you would expect someone from an MMA background to be, Katsuyori Shibata is a striker. He will punch you. He will kick you. He will headbutt you. He will hurt you in all ways that he possibly can. And they recently had, he had his title match a couple weeks ago against the champion, Kazuchika Okada, which that match I was planning on watching a couple days after it aired because I can't watch it that early in the morning and I have a schedule to keep. But there was rumors going on that after the match that Katsuyori Shibata had injured himself and he was going to be out for a while. And it was like, oh, don't worry, it's a work. You know, they're just saying that to, you know, increase sympathy for him. And then he'll be back next year or like in a couple months to like get another shot and be, you know, be the next big contender again. And then it just kept coming out that no, it's not maybe a work, like maybe he actually is hurt for real. And it kind of got reported. Because of the whole like, hey, what's going on? I never really watched it until it came out that apparently the injury is legit. There was a spot in the match that Katsuyori headbutts Okada, which is something he does in a lot of his matches, and he started bleeding from the head, which is not the first time that's happened either. So I kind of thought it was just, you know, like that was a gimmick thing he could do where he could like, you know, make a little tiny cut and then make it look good when he does the headbutt. But apparently this headbutt actually burst some kind of blood vessel in his head, and gave him some kind of hematoma that the doctors have said that very likely he will never be able to wrestle again. They finished the match. If you didn't know the information I just told you, you would think the match went off exactly as it was supposed to. But because it was one of my favorite wrestlers' last matches, I really like Shibata a lot. I've watched him in RPW and New Japan and everywhere else he's wrestled. Because of the fact that he is likely never going to wrestle again, it's been really hard for me to sit down and watch that match, simply because I know what the outcome is. And regardless of the quality, there's going to be that overarching sadness of no matter how awesome this is, this guy's never going to get in the ring again. And that really bummed me out. So that's kind of why we decided to shelf New Japan for this week, until I kind of feel better about watching someone's last match unfold in front of my eyes.
Yeah, it's tough to watch something like that knowing the end result. Knowing that this, what happens is not part of the plan. Knowing what happens is not a work, which is, what like smart marks immediately jump to. Like they immediately they're being tricked by something, and they have to get ahead of it so that they won't be fooled in the end. I'm smarter than that to know. And it's unfortunate to see somebody essentially give their career in a match. To put it out there in a match. So I get it. Like I understand why, and that's why I was like, well, we'll just talk about it another time, because to see something like that is tough. And we've seen tons of wrestlers come down the pike who have had last moments. We didn't know it was their last moments until their last moments arose. But I would think, in retrospect, it's tough to watch that. I was a big Edge fan, and when Edge came out that night after WrestleMania on Raw and talked about how he had to hang it up, that was shocking. And you feel awful for them because they're doing what it is that they love, But at the same time, you have to understand that too. Like they're a person first before they're an entertainer, right. And you don't want to see bad things happen to people that you like. Daniel Bryan is another perfect example. We never along the lines really saw the moments where that brought about sort of the end of Daniel Bryan's in-ring career. But had we, it would have been rough to watch it, to know like this is the moment.
And that's the difference. Like, like that Edge match, like I watched it live, not live in person, but live on pay-per-view. And, it was a good match with, I think it was Alberto Del Rio, right?
Yes.
That was the last.
Yes.
So like it was a good match. And then the next night he comes out and he says what he's going to do, and that felt okay because I didn't know before that moment that this was it. Like had I seen his retirement speech and then decided to go back and watch his last match, it would have been a little harder for me to do that. And especially in this case where this wrestler hasn't gotten back on TV because he's been in a hospital for 2 weeks now. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to be like, like as good as this is going to be, had I watched it live and then found out about it later, I still would have been as sad, but maybe I would have appreciated it more. Now with that knowledge going in, it's really hard for me to say, let me pull the trigger on watching this match I'm going to enjoy when I know that one of the competitors now has to give up the thing he loves doing the most just because I enjoyed this match, Yeah,
and especially when like the moment happens. When the moment happens, knowing now what you know, it's tough because now you could get into it and be excited about it, but there's still that sort of anxiety of like when the moment is coming, and then the moment happens, and then everything after that is sort of like, God, how is he doing this? I hope he's okay. Why don't they stop this? so yeah, I mean, I totally understand it. So at some point in time, we will get back to circling more around New Japan,
absolutely,
and discussing that.
And I'll let you know, like you mentioned earlier, that they've never been bigger in America than they are right now. A friend of mine in Los Angeles and I, Mike, hi Mike, We actually got front row tickets and sixth row tickets to their very first American shows ever in Los Angeles in July. So I will definitely be reporting on seeing New Japan live for the first time this July. They just, like I said, they just started breaking into America. That's kind of their business model for 2017 and beyond, is to at least do one pair, if not multiple pairs of shows in America every year under their own banner without partnering with Ring of Honor. So I'm really happy that they are taking a notice to America, because with the advent of New Japan Pro World and the Access stuff and Jim Ross commenting for a while and Mauro Ranallo commenting for a while, a lot more eyes are on Japanese wrestling than they have been ever in its existence on the American front. So I will be there. We will talk about it at length.
Well, let me ask you this then, especially just to touch upon one more point, I think, with New Japan. Was it the Wrestle Kingdoms that really sort of put them on the map in this way? Because, prior, I mean, there had been and there has been, Japanese superstars who have come this way, over the years, who I think have sort of found probably a tougher road to being embraced by the wrestling fans along the way. I would probably imagine that it would have maybe been maybe on ECW that people started to take more of an appreciation in some of the wrestlers who would have come from Japan. But when it comes for New Japan now, is it the probably the last two Wrestle Kingdom shows and sort of the major matches that came out of those that really drew people's attention to New Japan more?
Starting with Wrestle Kingdom 9. Wrestle Kingdom 9 was the very first New Japan Pro Wrestling event that was broadcast with English commentary. And they had Kevin Kelly and Jim Ross doing it, I believe. I might be wrong. No, it's Matt Striker. It was Matt Striker and Jim Ross on the first one. Wrestle Kingdom 9. That was the one with Shinsuke Nakamura versus Kota Ibushi, and one of the first meetings of Kazuchika Okada and Tanahashi. So it was a really great event, but they actively were like, you know what might be nice is allowing American audiences to listen to this in their own language and understand the stories we're telling, versus the Japanese commentary, which if you've ever listened to Japanese commentary, it's really easy to find out what's happening emotionally because those commentators are so ecstatic about what's happening. So you understand the ups and downs just by their voice, but you don't, let's speak Japanese, you have no idea what's being said. So when they actually did one of their quote unquote WrestleManias with an English commentary, it had more American interest from the smart marks than it ever had before. Then shortly after that, they did the AXS or the Access TV, where they would show last year's shows. They were way out of date, but they would catch you up on the story of what led to Wrestle Kingdom 9 and what was leading to Wrestle Kingdom 10. So that by the time Wrestle Kingdom 11 was rolling around, you were kind of like, okay, I'm not exactly up to date, but I know who these people are. I know where they came from. I know how the storylines interact. And then every single Wrestle Kingdom, they started doing English commentary, and then they started adding English commentary for Dominion, which is their big June pay-per-view. They would add it for the New Japan Pro Cup in March, and every couple of months you would have an English language pay-per-view. So just having American announcers, especially ones as high caliber as Jim Ross, talking about their product, that alone got Americans interested in Japanese wrestling in a way that they hadn't been before, outside of the really dedicated marks for that kind of stuff.
All right. So we will get, like I said, we will get back to New Japan more in depth along the road. But for now, Tom needs a break. Just emotionally not ready. And that's okay. So we'll give him some time. And then we'll come back and get you caught up. I do know that you wanted to talk a little bit about some Texas wrestling this week on the show. So and once again, bringing exposure to things that people may be unfamiliar about. What were some of the promotions that you want to sort of shine a light on? And once again, since you gave us Keith Lee last week, maybe some of the talent that people want to seek out. YouTube is always great for these things.
You got it, man.
That they want to that they once again they should pay attention to.
So I just wanted to give a little background, and not too much, on the wrestling that I've been watching over the last couple of years. So I live in San Antonio, Texas. So I'm a very small drive away from Austin, which in recent years has become kind of a hotbed for independent wrestling. So I just kind of wanted to give you some background on like what promotions I follow very closely, some of the wrestlers I like, and if you happen to be a Texas listener or maybe an Oklahoma listener or somewhere around this part of the country, and you're not aware of these promotions, brothers and sisters, you need to jump on it because they're all good here. So the one I've been following most closely for the longest is a company out of Austin called Inspire Pro Wrestling. I've been watching them since probably 2014. And what I've enjoyed about them is they are really good at telling long-form stories and building long-form feuds. They treat wrestling very it's a good mix of like serious wrestling and completely off-the-wall, batshit insane ideas. I want to say a couple months ago, one of the wrestlers, kayfabe, died, and they had a match between a tag team called the Submission Squad and that wrestler's ghost, who was that wrestler dressed as, in a sheet. So like,
it sounds dumb when you say it, but I can't help but laugh.
Yeah. So granted that, but like those are the undercard stuff that they do. That's just kind of like, okay, you know what's weird? We're going to try it. But then when you actually get to like their main event storylines, you've got blood feuds of people that have been angry with each other for months and months or years. You've got really good technical wrestlers. You've got really good power wrestlers. They've got really good high flyers, but they take wrestling seriously and try to give you storyline based entertainment. It's not just, here's some spots, everyone a spot. Like it's trying to give you a story. The people that I would say to watch out the most for out of Inspire Pro, we already talked about Keith Lee. He has been their pure prestige champion for something like 800 days, like well over 2 years at this point. But like some people I've been really impressed with was one of their former champions, Ricky Starks, who wrestles for another promotion I'll talk about shortly. Delilah Doom is one of my favorite wrestlers in the world. She is the perfect underdog wrestler. She's been on Raw a couple times getting squashed by Nia Jax and some other people. But Delilah Doom's a big one. She's incredible. I also am a big fan of Dirty Andy Dalton, who at one point was the most hated man in Texas. No one could play a heel as well as Dirty Andy Dalton. I would also say to be on the lookout for Terale Tempo, who is a very up and coming wrestler. He's got a while to go before he breaks out, but he has an energy and an intensity that's absolutely amazing to watch. He's been in Texas for a while, but those are all people that are spotlighted in Inspire Pro Wrestling. It's a wonderful, wonderful promotion. My friend John Golson actually does a podcast entirely about Inspire Pro Wrestling. So if you follow John Golson, a couple days after each event, the next one's in May, he will actually do a breakdown of the whole show and talk about what he thought and how it ties into the mythology of Inspire Pro. So if you have never seen them, go seek out John Golson's podcast. You can buy DVDs. You can also find them. You can also order on demand from their website, inspireprowrestling.com. That's the one I've been following the longest. However, there's a new kid in town called WrestleCircus, which I think if anybody follows professional wrestling like I do, you know what that name is. They came out of nowhere last October, and put together insane cards with the top talent from all around the world. Zack Sabre Jr. has wrestled for them. Brian Cage is their current champion. They brought in the Bullet Club, Guerrillas of Destiny from New Japan. They've had Ricochet there. They've had Joey Ryan has been there a lot. They just bring in the top tier names, and they're one of the promotions that I've been religiously going to because they managed to pull some of the best cards in the country. They rival Pro Wrestling Guerrilla in terms of talent and in terms of match quality. Pentagon Jr.'s wrestled there. It's been insane. Their next show is at the end of the month, and Billy is going to have me on to talk about kind of what that card looks like. The current lineup is John Morrison versus Brian Cage for the Ringmaster title, which is their big belt. And then there's also a 6-man tag match from Ohio is for Killers, which is Sami Callihan, Jake Christ, and Dave Christ versus Desmond Xavier, Leo Rush, and Shane Strickland. And that match is going to burn the building to the ground. So it's going to be an exciting night of pro wrestling. WrestleCircus is founded by two really nice people. They've been very with their fans. You all right?
It's the most random qualifier ever.
I'm not super familiar with a lot of wrestling promoters, but like they've been very engaged in social media and just in person. Like if you buy a ticket from them, they will send you an email saying thank you for your purchase. Like it's written by the owner. They're very open to feedback. They like the owners or the co-owners. Like I want to say the owner's wife because I think they're both co-owners. But she will stand out the door after every show and shake everyone's hand and thank them for coming. Like they just like being a part of wrestling, and it's just an easy promotion to get into. And like I said, you get to see some of the best wrestlers in the country. So I hope they continue to go the way they're going. I don't know how they're making money with the talent they're bringing in. I don't know how it's working for them. No idea financials, but I hope this sticks around for a while because it's really cool to be that close to one of the hottest promotions in the country. Like I said, it's basically like PWG in Texas. So those are the two that I attend the most. But I've been to VIP Wrestling in Dallas. Shout out to them. They put on a great show. I've been to Gulf Coast Wrestling in Corpus Christi, where I got to see Sammy Guevara versus Cody Rhodes. That was a fantastic show. Texas is kind of the place to be. We have a lot of great independent wrestling companies. So I just wanted to give you all kind of a feedback on who I watch, where I watch, and kind of the place that I'm from. So you kind of know where my local expertise is.
Well, see, this is why he's on the show. This is why he's the resident guru. This is why he is our on-the-street expert. Follow him on Twitter at @TheTomNix. And don't forget to do your homework. We're going back to Evolve 81. Matt Riddle. Check it out for next week, and we'll talk about it more. Tom Nix, thank you very much for joining me again this week, dude. I appreciate it.
Ooh, yeah, anytime.
All right, lots of intelligent wrestling conversation to think about, to ponder, to contemplate. And with that said, that's going to do it for us for this particular episode of the show. So I want to thank you guys for joining us once again. I want to thank the professor, Tom Nix, for educating us on some of the lesser known levels of the wrestling world. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at @TheTomNix. You can also follow me on Twitter as well at InfamousKid, and make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever it's convenient for you to get your podcasts from. We are everywhere, so iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, we're out there. So you name it, we're there. Just find us, do a search, Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. Make sure you subscribe, you comment, and you rate this show. So that always helps us as far as our placements. Take those few steps. I greatly appreciate us. On Twitter, at InfamousKid. Make sure you hit me up there. And I'll be back next week talking more intelligent wrestling on the IWC. I'll see you next time. Have a good weekend. Make sure you check out your homework. Evolve 81, Matt Riddle. I'm out, ladies and gents. Peace. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation has been a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.